doesn't have much of data. It's more of the principles of the arm's length, or the arm's length principle being applied. Economic control is as important as legal control in identifying associated enterprises, and transactions in a business restructuring arrangements without economic substance, or those outside of the arm's length principle, may be disregarded or invalidated in the application of tax rules. So these are the things that were highlighted in this case. And also, tax incentives or exemptions are construed strictly against the taxpayer. This is very similar with the Philippines also. What is the subject of this case? The subject of the transfer pricing case is the income, which is interest income on loans from non-resident corporation or individual. So we look at New Zealand rule. In New Zealand, it is subject to the 15% non-resident withholding tax. And in the Philippines, just for comparative purposes, it is subject to the 30% final withholding tax for non-resident foreign corporation and 25% for non-resident alien. However, there are preferential tax rates. In New Zealand, they have what we call the approved issuer levy tax regime of 2%. So there will be an application made to the CAR of New Zealand that you are an approved issuer levy. So your lenders will be subjected to the 2% withholding tax rather than the 15%. In the Philippines, there is also a preferential rate. But I haven't checked if there's a double taxation treaty for UK or New Zealand, which is the subject of these cases. But for regular companies or regular foreign national non-resident foreign corporation or non-resident alien, we have preferential tax rate of 10% if there is a CORTT application. I would like also to emphasize that in New Zealand, the 2% AAL or the approved issuer levy is for lender who is a non-resident and not an associated person. So this particular word associated person is very important in order for Cullen Group to apply AAL. And the purpose of the loan is to encourage investment in New Zealand. We will know later how these two attributes of the AAL was actually significant, how significant it is in the case. Then also there's the tax avoidance law. I find the New Zealand law very good because for them, if a tax avoidance arrangement is void as against the commissioner for income tax purposes, and the commissioner may counteract a tax advantage that a person has obtained from tax avoidance arrangement, whereby in the Philippines, tax evasion. However, because of transfer pricing, the tax avoidance might be, might be the effect of tax avoidance in the tax collection of BAR may be limited now. Because we have Section 50 of the NIRC, and the more updated or the more detailed RR 3-2013 or the arm's length principle applied in the Philippines. So what is the conclusion of the court? So the court dismissed the Cullen Group's challenge to the Commissioner's assessment of Cullen Group as liable for 51.5 billion of tax plus interest and penalties. So initially, the Commissioner of Internal Revenue of New Zealand actually assessed Cullen Group 51.5 million. And Cullen Group challenged it in the court, but they were defeated. The case was dismissed in favor of the Commissioner of Internal Revenue. How did the Commissioner of Internal Revenue came out with a $51.5 million assessment? The interest income of the subject of the case is the interest income amounting to 397 million. The tax paid by Cullen Group is 8%, meaning that $8 million, which is 2% approved issuer levy. 2% of 397 million is 8 million. However, Commissioner of Internal Revenue said it should be subject to the regular 15% withholding tax for non-resident citizen, which is 59.5 million, or 15% non-resident withholding tax, NRWT. So the assessment is the difference between the 59.5 million should be taxed, less the tax paid by Cullen Group of 8 million. The assessment is 51.5 million, exclusive of penalties and interest. So who are the entities involved in this case? The assessed party is Cullen Group Limited or CGL, or Cullen Group is the income payer and debtor. who took over CIL from Mr. Watson. Later we will know what happened. Its residence should be New Zealand. Sorry, it's not United Kingdom, it should be New Zealand. Cullen Investment Limited is also the resident of New Zealand. Sorry, these two residences are wrong. It is owned by Mr. Watson, then spun off to Cullen Group. So meaning Mr. Watson initially owns Cullen Investment Limited and then later on sold his shares in CIL to Cullen Group. So Mr. Eric Watson is the center of these entities. He owns Cullen Group and CIL and is the ultimate creditor of the subject loans. He is a former resident of New Zealand and then transferred to UK. Next will be Modena Holdings Limited or Modena and Mayfair Equity Limited or Mayfair. These are conduit companies with residence in Cayman Islands.
Okay, excuse me.
Yes, po.
Always, parang red alert ka. Pag sinabi mo conduit, may connotation siya na. Always red alert kayo pag narinig kayong conduit company. Kasi parang ang connotation dyan, no economic substance. And then, ano pa siya? Parang ginawa lang, kaya nga tinawag siyang conduit.
No commercial business.
Yes. Red alert ka.
Okay. Yeah. Somehow. Yes, and they were actually incorporated in a tax haven, Cayman Islands. So, again, I would like to correct myself. Cullen Group Limited and Cullen Investments are residents of New Zealand. Eric Watson is formerly a New Zealand resident, transferred to UK. And Modena and Mayfair are both Cayman Islands companies. Okay, so before the restructuring, before the cases happen, this is the situation. Mr. Eric Watson, a New Zealand resident, owns Cullen Group and CIL, CIL being Cullen Investments Limited, both situated, or all of them are situated in New Zealand. So Cullen owns Cullen Group and, Watson owns Cullen Group and Watson also owns CIL. His ownership is 15,000 shares, actually valued at 193 million. We will know later why is it valued at 193 million. And aside from the ownership, he also has shareholder advances to CIL amounting to $98 million. So this is before Mr. Watson's decision to change residency from New Zealand to UK. So when he changed residency, he needs to establish, according to his lawyers, he needs to establish his residency in UK in order for him to have a certain tax abode. Because if he will not establish residency in UK, he will be taxed both in UK and New Zealand. Yes, so he has to do something. That's what his lawyers said. So Mr. Watson sold on loan, meaning there's no cash involved. He sold his shares in Cullen Group to Cullen Investment Limited to Cullen Group at 193 million, but there's no cash involved. Also, Watson extended 98 million to Cullen Group as a loan, which was also extended as loan by Cullen Group to CIL, in order for CIL to pay the $98 million advances. So there's no cash involved in all of these transactions. So what's the summary? In summary, the ownership and advances to CIL of Mr. Watson was transferred to Cullen Group and in the form of loans. So the owner of CIL is now Cullen Group and also the owner of the loan. I mean, the rights on the loan is already with Cullen Group. So Mr. Watson now doesn't have anything, ownership or advances to CIL, it all were transferred to Cullen Group. So that's part one. But there's more. There's part two. Mr. Watson created Modena and Mayfair in Cayman Islands, and he assigned the loan to Cullen Group as follows. The 193 million will now be under Modena, and the 98 million under Mayfair. There's no cash involved again. So what happened is, Cullen Group Limited now has a loan from Modena of 193 million and loan from Mayfair of 98 million. And Modena will have a loan payable to Mr. Watson, same amount. The same thing with Mayfair, has a loan with Mr. Watson, same amount. Now, because of the loans, Cullen Group Limited paid 397 million in interest income, but before they paid the interest income, they actually submitted an application to the CIR in New Zealand to be an approved issuer levy. That's why their income taxes will now be subjected to the 2% withholding tax or 2% AAL, not with the regular 15% non-resident withholding tax. So they're very, very good. They have actually a big four who's advising them in this case. So what are the relevant issues involved? The business restructuring arrangements made by Cullen Group and Watson was ruled as tax avoidance scheme, and not merely to establish Watson's tax residency in UK. So the reason that I need to transfer my tax residency does not hold water here. The assignment of loans to Modena and Mayfair lacks economic substance, and Modena and Mayfair are merely conduit companies economically controlled by Watson. There is no legal ownership of Watson on the Modena and Mayfair, but during the case it was established that he is controlling these companies. That the AIL of 2% may not be used by Cullen Group, given that it circumvents the purpose of the law, which is to attract fresh foreign funding or investment in New Zealand. There was no fresh investments in New Zealand because the investments were there already and they just transformed it into loans. Conversely, the arrangement generated no fresh fundings, that is no cash flow, and only served to our after tax incidents to actually benefit from the lower tax rate. That's all. So these are the relevant issues involved. So in short, Cullen Group paid 51.5 million in basic taxes as well as interest and penalties. Yes, in the umubra scheme. But this is very good. If the CIR was not so good in finding this scheme, they might have actually succeeded. Yes, 13% decrease in income or tax from interest.
13%, because 13%. That is the difference between 15%
the regular and the 2%
that they want to avail.
Yes. But what I really wanted, I'm amazed with the CIR or the laws in New Zealand is that they have tax avoidance laws. But in the Philippines, tax avoidance is actually legal. So they're more advanced than the Philippines. So any questions? Very simple, no, there's no comparability analysis or anything. It's just applying the arm's length principle and the principle of economic control.
Modena and Mayfair, saan sila registered?
Sa Cayman Islands, tax haven. So, walang tax sa Cayman Islands and the withholding tax is only 2%. So, very nice.
Anong year ito?
I'm sorry.
The decision is 2019, right?
Yes, I think yes. 2016 transactions pala. Very, very fast in New Zealand.
Yes.
3 years they were able to decide a case in the High Court.
Yes.
In the Philippines, it will take 10 years.
More.
More.
Look at the 2019 decision of the Supreme Court. Look at the cases. It's very, very old cases. It's 2019.
Because before the cases were actually elevated to the court, there were actually previous cases, and then there were assessments by the BR, and if the taxpayer actually waived the prescription, you are expecting 20 years in the making.
Yes.
Okay na po. Thank you very much po.